Good morning, I'm Rowena Crosby.
And I'm Deborah Renner, and we're your co-hosts for this show. Thank you for joining us for the next 17 minutes for Your Invisible Toolbox, the show that looks at the tools for working effectively with others.
And Your Invisible Toolbox is sponsored by Tero International. The experts at Tero show you how to leverage the 85% of success that comes from your people skills. We welcome you to today's pre-recorded broadcast. Today we're going to look at habits, how they serve us, how they hold us back. You're going to love this show if you've ever tried to change a habit.
Much of what we do in life we actually do by habits, and the habits are formed from the experience throughout our lifetime. And the funny thing is they're wonderful things because they allow us to do several things at once.
They do. I have a long commute to work, and because I can drive my car on that very same route all the time, by habit, I can also do something else at the same time. So I'll listen to an audiobook, or I can carry on a conversation on the phone, or I can be thinking about this show or my next presentation.
Well, it's the same thing with exercise. If we make it a habit, all of a sudden we can listen to a video, we can be thinking about something else and still maintaining our exercise because it's repetitive.
It's repetitive, and that really can be helpful unless we're trying to make a change, and then those same wonderful habits can become stumbling blocks to our success. One of the things we know about habits is they start first at a conscious level and then they become automatic through repetition.
And according to Psychology Today, approximately 85% of what we do throughout the day is by habit. Of the remaining 15%, half of the things we do it's by conscious choice. So if you're watching this show, you've made a conscious choice. The other half, it's because of outside influences. It might be because of pressure from someone, or just an automatic impulse.
Exactly. And if you do not agree that 85% of what you do is by habit, we challenge you to take your wastebasket wherever it's sitting next to your desk and move it to the other side of the desk, and give us a call and tell us how long you're throwing trash on the floor.
And if you think about it, it is so true that most of what we do during the day is unconscious. We get out of bed unconscious. We get ready for work without having to be conscious. Sometimes we even drive to work unconsciously.
We often drive unconsciously. It's a little horrifying to think about it, but you've probably had that experience where you pull into the parking lot at work and you wonder how you got there, or you drive home at the end of the day and you don't recall the drive.
Each week we focus on one tool from the book, Your Invisible Toolbox, and this week we're going to focus on Chapter 90. If you have a copy of the book in front of you, and it's Practice Makes Permanent, and if you don't have your personal copy, click on the link below and get your own personal copy so that you can follow along.
We're going to have a couple of activities for you, so if you got a pen and paper handy, and that'll be useful for you here shortly. And then later in the show, when we look at our development challenge, we're going to invite you to contemplate how to prepare yourself not just for greater success at work or in your personal relationships. We're actually going to talk about your brain health.
Oh, and our featured social media posts are going to inspire you to make your cognitive health a priority. And we're going to do a segment called Two Truths and a Lie, where we're going to find out some misconceptions around habits.
There happens to be one very big one we're going to look at. So let's get started.
All right, so Ro asked you to get a pen or a pencil and paper, so you've got that in front of you. And what we'd like you to do is pick up the pen or pencil and write your name on that piece of paper. So you're going to write your name as if you're signing a check or signing a contract. All right, how did that go? Take a look at how does it look. Now we're going to ask you to put that pen or that pencil in the other hand. So put it in the other hand, and now go ahead, write your name again, and this time write your address, write your zip code. You can even include your telephone number. We'll give you a little minute to do that.
You and I could chat for a while because they're going to need some time.
It takes a while.
It does.
Do you need more time? And I imagine you're looking at how it looks. How does it look? Is it readable? Does it look like your child might have written it, or a child might have done that? And how did it feel to have to put that pen or pencil in the other hand and write that down? Was it a little awkward?
And did you happen to notice what you were doing during that activity? Not the activity itself that you were probably focused on, but what were you doing during the activity? When you first picked up the pen to write your name the first time Deb asked you to, you probably just picked it up and wrote your name. But when you were asked to put it in the other hand, did you find yourself laughing? If there was someone in your presence, did you find yourself grumbling or complaining to them?
And did you notice it takes a bit longer in that other hand, and it actually feels pretty frustrating? And when we asked you to do it the first time, you probably picked that pen or pencil up right away effortlessly without even having to think about it, and you were able to write that. But when you have to write with the other hand, it's harder because you do have to think about it. You have to be conscious.
Exactly. You've got a habit of writing with your preferred hand. And when we have to change that, that's when we have to become conscious. It's just a great activity to make us aware of how unconscious we are. Everything starts out on a conscious level, and then over time it becomes unconscious and becomes a habit.
When you first learn to write, if you remember back to when you first learned to write, or if you have little ones that are learning to write, you know you're very conscious around that activity until you acquire the skill. And once you've had enough repetition, you've acquired the skill, then it's effortless. You don't even have to think about it. You will just pick up and do that with your dominant hand without making a decision to do that.
And it is kind of fun to watch a little person starting to learn this, because you get to watch that process of forming a habit happening. So you're unconscious about your activities until somebody says, okay, write with your other hand, then you become conscious, and then you may become cranky.
Think about all of the habits that you have. In order to change them, you have to become conscious.
So think back one more time to that little activity. Do you think you might get good at writing with the other hand? Well, that is an interesting question. If you stick with it, you probably will acquire some skills over time, but will you stick with it? Most of us just go back to the habit that we had. And that's the challenge with continuous learning.
And the interesting thing, I find this so interesting, is one of the reasons that good companies actually fail to become great companies, or successful people actually start to stagnate, is that changing habits might not be essential. If things are going well, we don't really have the motivation to change. And so in that respect, many times companies will just be at a standstill, or people can be at a standstill. However, if things aren't going well, and we have to be open to changes in order to make something different happen. And that's when we will take on whatever the challenge is in order to change a habit, because we know that if we have inaction, nothing's going to change, and it's not comfortable to be in that spot where things aren't going well.
Yeah, and isn't it unfortunate? Things have to get bad to force us to do that.
So true.
Well, this brings us to our Invisible Tool of the Week. And our Invisible Tool this week is found on page 215 of the book, Your Invisible Toolbox. The chapter is called Practice Makes Permanent, and the tool itself is called Practice Mindfully.
And attention spans are dropping. We actually prefer bite-sized bits of information that we can get quickly. We like to have resources right on time. What does this mean for our overall cognitive development?
Have you ever tried to improve your golf game? Have hours on the course, tons of money spending, all the time with the golf pro, all those dozens and dozens of hours playing rounds of golf. Has that led to mastery of the game?
Most of us are convinced if we just practice enough that we are going to get better.
Yes.
And the countless hours of practice and the money spent on the pro aren't always going to lead to anything but unremarkable results.
So practice is maybe not all that's required. And I'm going to read to you a quote that's just very insightful on this. It's also in the book. Maestro, mentor, and polio survivor Ishtak Perlman offers this advice on the subject of practice. Here's what he says. As a child, I hated to practice. But practicing is an art, and it's not just about putting in the time. A lot of kids are too young to immediately understand that. They'll say, well, I'm going to do my 4 or 5 hours a day, and I'm going to keep repeating it, and it's all going to be good. And sometimes they wonder why it's not working. So he tells us you have to organize your practice. You need a goal. You need to ask yourself, why am I practicing and what is it for? Sometimes repetition without thinking can be counterproductive. If you practice something wrong without knowing it, then you have to undo it by practicing even more. If you practice slowly and with a brain, he says, you'll save a lot of time. You can accomplish in an hour what might otherwise take you a week.
That's a beautiful quote.
Great insight.
It really is. So does practice make perfect? We would say practice makes permanent. And this is an insight that's embraced by masters of any field. And it takes practice, but it also takes, to acquire the skill, setting the goals to be able to acquire that skill, and not mindlessly repeating something for repetition's sake. That's not an intelligent approach.
Absolutely. So beyond preparing ourselves and our organization to be nimble for change, it turns out there could be some potential health benefits by learning something new, and that is the focus of our Development Challenge of the Week.
This is the segment of the show that we call the Development Challenge of the Week, and this week we're going to challenge you to change a habit.
Like many of you, I have a personal connection to Alzheimer's disease. My dad experienced early onset Alzheimer's when he was in his 50s, and by a decade later he was completely devastated by the disease, and he passed away at age 66. I'm now in my 50s, so the age he was when he first got the early onset. So understandably, I've got an interest in this subject. I've been doing some reading and thinking about what my own brain health is about. There is a strong genetic component to Alzheimer's.
There is, and according to the Alzheimer's Association, the number of Americans living with Alzheimer's is actually growing, and growing very fast.
It is growing very fast. There's an estimated 5.5 million of us in the United States of all ages that have Alzheimer's. Most of them are over age 65, about 5.3 million, but there are 200,000 people living with Alzheimer's with a younger onset.
And because of the increasing number of people over age 65 in the United States, the number of new cases of Alzheimer's dementia is projected to soar. In fact, they say today someone in the United States develops Alzheimer's dementia every 66 seconds.
Once a minute.
And mid-century, they say that will be reduced to every 33 seconds.
So that's got some scientists' attention. And the scientists are taking a look at some of the risk factors around Alzheimer's, and not surprisingly, some of them are things like age, family history, and heredity. Those are things we can't do very much about. But there is some good news. There's some emerging evidence that suggests there may be some factors that we can influence.
One promising line of research says the strategies for overall healthy aging may help keep the brain healthy and may even reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's.
And so some of the things they suggest that we do: eat a healthy diet, stay socially active, that seems to be important, avoid tobacco and excess alcohol, and they talk about exercise, but not just for the body, also for the mind.
So what does it mean to exercise our mind?
Well, the common thinking, many of you have heard, is, well, you got to do crossword puzzles, and this is going to help you with the neuron connections and ward off Alzheimer's. Well, it turns out if you like crossword puzzles, go ahead and keep doing that, and that might keep some of your current connections pretty active. But whether or not that's benefiting to ward off Alzheimer's is in question. When we do crossword puzzles, what we're doing is accessing information that's already encoded in our brain.
So our development challenge this week then is to commit to actually learning something new, something that, not to improve a skill you already have, but tackle something completely new. Learn to write with your non-preferred hand, or if you're in fear of giving a presentation, go take a presentation skills class, something completely new that we don't have any neurons around at this point.
Yes, because what we're really trying to do is forge those new connections. And so it could be something small, like learning to write with your other hand, or it could be something major, like learning a new language or learning a new musical instrument, but something that's introducing new concepts to your brain to make those new neuron connections. We challenge you that this week. Well, this is the segment of the program we call Two Truths and a Lie. We're going to present to you 3 statements. We are going to present them as facts, and your job is to figure out which one's the lie.
All right, are you ready? Here's the statement number 1. Habits are learned behaviors. Statement number 2. Habits are resistant behaviors. And statement number 3, it takes 21 days to change a habit. Which one's a lie?
Well, if you're thinking the lie is the 3rd statement, that it takes 21 days to change a habit, you're right. That's a popular misconception that came up from a book in the 1960s by Maxwell Maltz. It's still very much a misconception that's alive today. And a lot of vendors are going to offer you a quick fix. on jumpstarting an exercise routine, what's the great diet plan, how do you solve all of your financial woes with this mistaken belief that habits can be changed in 21 days.
And the length of time it takes to change a habit actually depends on several factors. If it's something simple like I'm going to drink a glass of water after every meal, you might be able to accomplish that and get that set in 21 days. But most of the habits we're trying to change are more complex than that. And they could take hundreds of days in order to be able to actually set that and change that. And it's going to depend on what the current habit is, what you have to unlearn, and then what you're trying to learn.
So that was your lie. Habits take longer than 21 days. Okay, let's look at the other two statements. Statement number 1, habits are learned behaviors. That is a true statement. None of us were born with our habits. We picked up our habits through repetition, and that's incredibly good news because if they're learned, that means they can be unlearned and we can make different choices.
And statement number 2 was habits are resistant behaviors, and that's actually true as well. Our established habits are very tough to break, and if you want to change a habit or form a new habit, it's going to take some time, and there's going to be that normal discomfort that we have when we learn something new. But here's the good news about that. That's actually good for your brain. That's going to help keep your brain active, and that's going to be good for you cognitively.
Well, it's time for our featured social media post of the week, and those of you that follow Tero on social media already know we post useful links and content many times every day on relevant interpersonal skills topics. We're going to feature 2 of them today.
Our first featured post is to a popular TED Talk, Alzheimer's Doesn't Have to Be Your Brain's Destiny, says neuroscientist and author of Still Alice, Lisa Geneva. She shares the latest science investigating the disease and some promising research, things each of us can do to get an Alzheimer's resistant brain. It's just a wonderful post. And so this link to this video will be on all Tero social media platforms on Monday.
And you'll, if in addition to watching that post, pick up a copy of the book,
Yes.
Still Alice, or watch the movie. It's fabulous. Our second featured post is to an NPR article for a story that was featured on their very popular show, Fresh Air. And it explores insights from Charles Duhigg's very popular book, another must-read, The Power of Habit, Why We Do What We Do in Life and Business. You'll find that link on all Tero social media platforms on Wednesday.
It's an excellent book as well.
It is a great book. We've all read it here at
Yes.
Tero. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you missed any portion of the program or want to share it with others, you'll find it loaded onto Tero's YouTube channel. Tune in again next Monday morning at 9:03 Central Time, where we will explore another tool in your Invisible Toolbox.
And now it's your turn. We do welcome your ideas and suggestions for future shows. Email your ideas to ideas@yourinvisibletooolbox.com, and we'll incorporate those in our future shows. And find us on your favorite social media platform. And if you haven't subscribed to Tero's YouTube channel, that makes it easy for you. You'll be alerted to when future shows will air, so subscribe by following the link below. A thank you to Kyle Plummer, our director, and Rachel Trainham, our camera person today.
And thanks for joining us. That's a wrap.